WWE Summerslam has long been the highlight of the wrestling calendar when it comes to the middle of the year. Now, yes, WrestleMania is up there when it comes to these marquee events, but SummerSlam has almost always been that number 2 show. Now, when it comes to that show, we've seen a lot of good, great, and incredible SummerSlams, while at the same time we have seen a few stinkers. But we are sticking in that incredible tier today as we are looking at the most consensusly rated best SummerSlam ever, 2002. Now, this SummerSlam has had a lot of debate on it, whether it's the best or SummerSlam 2000, which I may review at some point. But for the moment, we're looking at the highest rated one on cagematch.net as well, which is a wrestling database online. Now, Cage Match has rated this a 9.11 out of 10, while the second best, which I believe was 2013, was about an 8.9 or so. This is why I'm going to be looking at this SummerSlam, which I've watched over the course of yesterday and today, and I'm now reviewing for you here. There are 8 matches that we're going to be looking at, including a lot of young talent making their way into WWE, such as Brock Lesnar, Rey Mysterio, Chris Jericho, who's still relatively new at this point, and the same with Kurt Angle. And at the same time, a lot of talent that are still, pretty old, but they're still veterans who can amply keep up with the younger guys at this point. Ric Flair, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, and people of their nature. Now, this means that we are going to be seeing a lot of 2000s matches, so you know what that means. They're not going to be all perfect, especially not compared to the standards of today, but I'm going to be trying to review them without much bias behind them so that I can give you a fair and accurate representation of what is said to be one of the greatest SummerSlams ever. But does it deserve that moniker? Let's find out. Kurt vs. Rey opens up the show, and this is a very entertaining match meant to show off Rey to an audience that may have not seen his WCW work, and to give Kurt a nice SummerSlam win, which is exactly what it accomplishes in only 9 minutes. This match is exactly 9 minutes and 25 seconds long, and it is a banger from start to finish. This is the great opening match of the show that a lot of people have talked about on places like Twitter and here on YouTube. But the main thing is, this might be the highlight of the night. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's always great to have your opener be good. But in my opinion, it's probably the best match on the show. And that does kind of set a poor precedent, but ends up being good in the first place. Now, if you don't remember my ranking system from the previous video that I did reviewing an old show, here's how it goes. A bad match basically represents what a 1-star would be. A poor match is a 2-star. A fine match is a 3-star, a good match is a 4-star, and a great match is a 5-star. Now, I'm not saying this to be a 5-star, Tokyo Dome Classic or anything, because Dave is washed. I'm just saying that it's a great match. Now, there are various other tiers that I will open up to if I do more of these that include various things. For example, on my Google Doc, I have this as a blue when it could be a purple, which represents a better tier above it. But for the moment, this is the highest I'll be going. Nonetheless, this is a great opening match, and Angle enters normally, but Rey, we don't know where he is. His music plays, and no one comes out. Kurt's standing there like, come on, come out. And then camera slightly pans over. Rey's right behind him, bounces out the ropes, and attacks him from behind, kicking off the match a non-stop banger. Kurt is working Rey's back with submissions, while Rey is flying around with, low-key, a bazillion times more athleticism than nowadays, which is obvious. Father Time is always going to be catching up to everybody, and he did so with Rey. Rey's obviously not up to that point anymore, but still, this is a great flying match nonetheless. Kurt does kick out of a 619 and a West Coast pop, which did surprise me a little bit. I didn't know who was winning coming in, as many other kickouts during this match did, because I knew it was 9 minutes, but I couldn't in my head judge how long 9 minutes had been, so I was really just surprised at almost all the kickouts during this affair. Kurt does end up getting the win, though, with Rey submitting to the ankle lock after, as I said, 9 minutes and 25 seconds. This is a very good match. It kicks to the show and gives everyone like a kick and like, whoa, okay, this show's gonna be a good freaking show. Let's go. We end up getting a backstage segment with Stephanie and Eric Bischoff, and Stephanie McMahon is hyping up how good Rey versus Kurt was to a crew member before asking him to go find Eric Bischoff and mock him for the fact that SmackDown's doing well. She enters her office, and where's Eric Bischoff? Inside her office. And they bicker a little bit about, why are you in here? Well, there's only one GM's office today, so we're both going to have to be in here. But they decide to make amends for the evening and decide to watch the show together. We cut back to the arena as we're getting the entrances of Chris Jericho and Ric Flair. Woo! for a match between the two of them. This is a good match, not up to the quality of the previous one. However, it's still entertaining. This is one of the lower rated matches that it's on the cage match listing, and I do believe it's not the best match or close to the best match of the night, but it is viable enough from two very good competitors. This is a chop fest from both men with at least 40 between them. Yes, most of them are probably from Flair, but Jericho does his own as well, and they are loud, which is not surprising and not a bad thing either. Chop away as much as you want to, but nonetheless, chop fest galore. Flair does tap to the figure four at one point. However, he's grabbing the rope, so the referee negates the tap, and Chris gets up and he's like, "Yes, I've won. Yes, let's go." But the ref's like, No. He grabbed the ropes. You haven't won yet. So Flair attacks from behind, but Jericho accidentally whacks the referee in the face. Charles Robinson isn't, completely knocked out by this, but he stumbles back a bit. He's like, "Whoa, what's going on here?" Looks down for a second, which allows Flair to hit him from behind. Low blow, and Jericho's like, "Oh my goodness gracious!" Falls over and submits to the figure four, and Jericho's angry because he thinks he should have won with the previous figure four of his own. We get a backstage promo by Paul Heyman hyping up Brock Lesnar for his match with The Rock. As always, pretty good. And at this point, the show is pacing itself quite well. Got a great match, a solid opener, even though it was in the death slot, a great second match as well between Flair and Jericho. I wouldn't say great, I'd put it at good, but it's viable enough that the last time I watched a show was probably going to be Raw last night, or a couple earlier this week, and it wasn't incredible, but this is definitely making up for the lack of quality from that episode anyways. Then we move on to Eddie Guerrero versus Edge. I'm giving this great as well. I do think it kind of skirts the line between good and great, but I think it nudges just up into great because it is some good technical work from two not exactly technically inclined wrestlers, but still an entertaining one at that. And fun fact, I have Edge's exact gear from this SummerSlam with the exact, coloring and everything. Quite cool, but nonetheless, Eddie does spend the entire of this match working on Edge's shoulder, and he kicks out of a frog splash onto that injured shoulder after about 12 minutes, Edge does. And at one point, Eddie's been on top for a while until Edge makes a random comeback, diving to the outside, and both men are taken out. This is a very good match, as I've said. However, it's a little bit different than really every match on the show because it's two guys who you expect to do this, and they do something completely different, but it works. And that somehow happens with a later match down the show, but it doesn't work as well for me. But we're going to get to that in due time. Eddie is trying to get to Edge with his clasp arm drag from the top rope, the one where he's like, "Oh, I got your hand. I'm going to go to the top rope now." He jumps off, rolls over, flings the other person across the ring. But Edge throws him down, dodges a clothesline, and hits a spear, wins the match. Whoa! I don't know. A big problem this show does have, and we will get to this later on as well, but they do not like selling their injuries because Edge, who hits the spear with his injured shoulder, by the way, completely no-sells the fact that his shoulder is supposed to be worked over. It does bleed. His shoulder is bleeding a little bit during this match as well. And he's like, "Oh, I dodged your clothesline. Oh, spear. Yes, hooray." Goes for the pin. And only after he wins does he's like, "Oh, right, my shoulder. Ouch." So it's a little bit odd, but I do think it is a great match to continue a slew of good ones throughout the show. Then we get a Christian and Lance Storr backstage promo, as they are the members of the Un-Americans, hype their match and clown on Americana. They disrespect the crowd in Long Island before leaving, and I notice their tag team titles, which is, this is the WWE at this point. It's not WWF anymore, but their belts still say WWF on them. It's very hard to see, but there's a moment where Lance Storm slightly adjusts his arm, and you can see that it says WWF on them. And I see what you're doing here, not fixing those titles. And they do the same thing with the IC title, because they blur it out for this show, because it's supposed to say WWE, but I'm assuming it says WWF. But nonetheless, we do get the Un-Americans versus Booker T and Goldust for the tag team titles. This is fine. This is probably the worst match on the show, but I'm not saying it's bad by any means. It's just perfectly serviceable. The heels end up getting the win in the most TV match easily on this show. They isolate Goldust. Booker T hot tag. They mess around for a little bit, become bumbling idiots. Booker T does his signature spots. They try steel chairs. They try a title shot and miss everything. But Test does end up running in, hits a big boot to Booker T, and then he tries to run off without the referee catching him. The referee, he's like leaning against the rope, like, "Oh my gosh, I've been hit by something," because he ends up getting whacked. But he's very clearly puts his head up and sees Test leave the ring, and he's like, "Oh no." He gets up, sees the Booker's being covered, crawls over. 1, 2, 3. Booker's shocked, like, oh, what? No, and he doesn't end up winning the tag team titles. And he's a little sad about this, but nonetheless, it's a bit weird, and I don't think it's very good, but I did give it a fine because the match as a whole was just serviceable, and nothing more, nothing less. Then we get to the slightly sexist part of the show. So we get a hard cut to WWE New York, where they're having a bit of a segment where a lucky fan, quote unquote, I don't actually know if it is a fan, gets a makeout session with Nidia on a couch. Hey, 2002 is a weird time. I mean, this is a weird segment because Jamie Noble, I think, is there and he's like, okay, everybody, this guy's going to get a kiss from Nidia. Let's cheer him on, guys. Woo! Crowd is like, yeah, let's go. Kissing, sex, boobs, let's go. And then, Nidia leaps on the guy. And then Jamie Noble is acting like a stoner who just walked in on his best friend getting a makeout session. Because he's like, oh, yeah, dude, go at it. Yeah, let's see this hot action. Let's go. And this whole time, this guy is just getting a makeout session from Nidia. He's like biting, or like one of them is biting, clearly, because they're just going like, and it looks really weird. But they end up this weird segment with Jamie Noble being like, yeah, let's go. And we see Eric Bischoff and Stephanie backstage again, where Eric says that Van Dam will bring the IC title back to Raw. We get that match next with Benoit versus Rob Van Dam. This is another good match for this show. A bit slower than I expected, but still an entertaining one. There are a lot of rest holds in this match and a lot of slow sequences, and I get a lot of people from the time may have enjoyed this. I did read the comments on this match, and it was one of the higher rated ones on the night. I don't think it's worth that. I do think it is good, but I don't think it's at that level that a lot of people were saying it was. It doesn't really make that much sense to me how slow this works between Benoit and Van Dam, both of which I thought were a lot faster than this, and I've seen matches from both men where they've been much faster. See WrestleMania 20 and One Night Stand 2006 for examples. But it's still serviceable enough to give it a good, and it's Van Dam and Benoit who, in their flaws, are still very good wrestlers. Chris is working the shoulder in preparation for the crossface, while Van Dam is trying to make this like an underdog comeback. And this in the tag title match from earlier is just a lull in the show between, like, the tag match to here is just a bit of a part of the show. There's nothing really happening. I do think the match after this bumps it up a little bit. A lot of people don't like it. However, I do, but we're going to get back to the one that I'm talking about right now. The finish comes when Van Dam reverses a superplex into a crossbody, followed by the 5-star frog splash for 3, and wins the IC title back on Raw. We cut backstage where Bischoff is like, ha ha, see, I told you I'm getting the IC title back on Raw. Stephanie stands up as Bischoff kind of flubs what he's saying. He's like, I got the IC title back on Raw. And then Stephanie stands up, looks right at him and goes, and just leaves. She just walks out and Bischoff's like, huh? What just happened, dude? And then we just go back to the ring where they're like, that was weird. And then we just go to the next match, which is Undertaker versus Test. Now, this was, I believe, the lowest rated match on this whole show at a 4.40 based on 95 different votes. However, I don't think that's worth this. I do think the tag team match is not as good. I don't think Flair and Jericho, or Flairico as I have dubbed it, is as good. I'm not saying it's a good match. I'm just saying it's fine. And I gave it a good. It can operate as a fine. It kind of skirts the line between that as well. I decided to give it the benefit of the doubt and bump it up to that good category. But I do think people are not giving this match enough flowers. This follows a very similar format to the tag team match from earlier. However, since there's no just isolating person, hot tag, I do think it is a bit more entertaining. They have a serviceable hoss fight with big slams and throws. Taker does all his signature spots, big boot, snake eyes, tombstone, chokeslam, etc. And Test amply keeps up, with Taker winning with a tombstone. Yet again, the other un-Americans are trying to help out, but Taker is able to deal with the both of them with a pair of chokeslams, and then, as I said, ends up getting that win with that tombstone pile driver. I do think this is the better of the un-Americans matches on the night. As I said, a lot of people do not enjoy it at all. However, I'm not taking a quiz. I am taking a test because I enjoy his match on the show. We move on to the penultimate main event, which is Shawn freaking Michaels versus Triple H. This is a good match. A lot of people say this is the best match on the show, as based on the ratings here. This was the one that was rated 9.11. The other one was rated a 9.19. I am sorry for that. However, this is a 4.25 by Dave Meltzer. That's the rating he gave it back in 2002. I don't think it's worth that. It's a little too long. It's a little too basic for an unsanctioned match. And I don't think it is worth this, 4.5. I do think it is good, but maybe not to that point. So this is Shawn's return match after 4 years away. He had that big back injury, lost his smile and all back in 1998, and he decided to come back to fight off against Triple H. A near 30-minute brawl with a lot of basic unsanctioned spots. It's fun all around, but they're just very simple. There's a crossbody onto a table. Like, cool, awesome. That's in like every, TLC, unsanctioned, no DQ match you've ever seen. There's a steel chair shot to the back, a steel chair shot to the head. What else is there? A fire extinguisher getting bonked on Triple H's head. It's perfectly fine spots that, contribute to the match and all, but okay, whatever. It's just a perfectly normal no DQ match, even though it is technically unsanctioned. And it's quite bloody as both men bleed a lot, especially Triple H. He does have a pretty big gash on the top of his head. Shawn does get up getting the win with a roll through on the pedigree after trying Sweet Chin Music. He goes for Sweet Chin Music. Trips catches it, spins him around, kicks it, gets him. Oh my gosh. Sorry. Gets him ready for the pedigree, gets him down. Shawn flips over, bridges, 1, 2, 3, wins the match. It's a very quick finish, and it is, just kind of out of nowhere. RKO. The biggest problem is that Shawn, from really 20 minutes in onward, just kind of stopped selling his back, which he has been being like, oh my gosh, my back hurts so much from all that surgery, and I broke it, and oh no, boo-hoo. But then from that point onward, he just stops selling it. Like, he does a kip up perfectly fine. He does Sweet Chin Music perfectly fine. He dives from the top rope to the outside perfectly fine. And it's just not selling his back anymore. And that, as I said earlier, was a big problem with the previous match, and now it's a problem with this match. But I do think the match is good enough to make up for it, and I am giving it that 4 out of 5 rating. Now we move on to the penultimate segment. This is the worst segment on this show by a mile. Now, I do not want to cover this, but it is on the show. I have to deal with it. So we have a Howard Finkle and Trish Stratus segment. I know, what a pair. And Howard enters the ring and says he has a few things that he wants to get off his chest. He says to the crowd, this is the first pay-per-view since WrestleMania 2 that he had called in the arena in NYC. And he's like, oh, yeah, okay, that's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. He's about to say a second thing, but Trish Stratus comes out and he's like, oh, what's this? She walks out and she apologizes for slapping him and shoving him into a pool of mud. She also begins to flirt with him, saying, oh, Howard, until tonight I didn't realize, but your voice is actually quite sexy. And Howard's like, oh, wow, let's go. And he says, it certainly is a dog-eat-dog world, isn't it? Especially when you've got the puppies and I've got my wiener. And it is disgusting. Trish says, okay, let's have a hug. So they hug each other. And Trish says, actually, you know what? I do have another surprise, which is Lillian Garcia. And then Howard's like, huh? He turns around. Lillian smacks him in the face. Wow, that was a good one. And then he's like, oh my goodness gracious. And then Lillian hits him with a kicking low blow. He's down. He's like, oh no, my balls, my wiener. He goes down, and Trish and Lillian celebrate as he rolls out of the ring. Very random, very weird. I do believe this happened because Howard usurped Lillian or something like that, because that seems to be what she's shouting about. But it makes zero sense out of context and is very inappropriate considering you've got the puppies and I've got my wiener is a sentence said on this show, which is absolutely vile. But we do move on to the main event, which is Rock Brock, The Rock versus B-Rock Lesnar. And this is a great brawl. I did end up giving it a good rating. And while it did feel a bit dull relative to the violence of Trips and Shawn, it was still fun. Rock comes in guns ablaze. He comes in with the title as he's the defending world champion, tosses the belt down, and just charges Brock before the bell even rings. Paul does eventually end up going through a table with a rock bottom. Brock spears a post. Rock takes a Brock bottom, which is just Rock doing a rock bottom, but since it's Brock, it's a Brock bottom. Get it? And then everybody is having fun here. The finish comes when both men are tangled up. Brock's trying the rock bottom. Brock's able to reverse it. Pushes Brock into the ropes. Rock bounces back. Gets picked up for the F5. Escapes with a couple elbows. Spins him around. Tries another rock bottom. Brock tosses him off. Bounces back. Grabs his arm. Spins him around a couple of times. Gets him up in position. Rock can't escape. Brock F5, and Brock wins the belt. 1, 2, 3. Your new WWE Undisputed Champion, Brock Lesnar. How'd I do? But that is the end of this pay-per-view. Now, I do think this was a good show. It had a lot of good moments, great moments even, but it also had those negative female segments that I do not appreciate being on this show just 22 years ago, even though I said it was a while ago. But in reference, 22 years is not that long to be making these kinds of comments towards women. It's not 1937. Yeah. But when I went into this show review, I expected every match to be a banger, and the show, mostly, it delivered. The tag title match, Flairico and Taker Test were the bottom three, so to speak. Not saying they were bad, they were just purely just not up to par with the remainder of the show. Kurt and Rey was easy match of the night, while Eddie and Edge is a very plain but good number 2. You can put Trips and Shawn probably at 3 or the main event. Otherwise, most everything had at least some highlights. However, the lack of the women on the show was disappointing, and the appearances they had were absolutely disgusting. But overall, a good show supplemented by a pair of great matches that helped it truly come together really made this at least worthy of a good SummerSlam. Maybe not the worthy of the best SummerSlam ever title, but a viable contender nonetheless. So, do you agree? Have you seen the show before? If you haven't, I do recommend you do. Just skip those female segments. They're absolutely terrible. But make sure you have a good day, good evening, good night, good morning, good dawn, good dusk, go whatever. Make sure to watch any former or future episodes on this channel. And goodbye.